So we can get started. Welcome, everybody. This is the open house for our newly launched Psychedelic Therapy and Integration certificate program, which is more than just a new program. It's really a redesign of our certificate offerings. So I'm really glad that you're here. I'm really glad that you're listening. Before we begin, I would like to first introduce myself. If you don't know me, my name is Ingmar Gorman. I am a clinical psychologist by training, also the CEO and co-founder of Fluence, along with Elizabeth Nielsen, and also a lead trainer. And joining me today is Dr. Alex Camargo. He is our director of the Psychedelic Harm Reduction and Integration certificate program.
Glad to be here. Welcome.
So we'd like to take this time to both explain a little bit about what our new program consists of, how it works, but also go into a little bit of a deep dive around why we've decided to make this change and what this brings to the future. What we're looking ahead in terms of what's coming down the pike as it relates to psychedelic medicine. And so we're hoping that this redesign will address that. So maybe a good place for us to start is just around a description of the program, what it looks like, how much it costs, and then we could talk a little bit more about why we decided to make this change. So what I'll do is I'll share screen in a moment. So this foundational or core program that we're titling the Psychedelic Integration and Therapy Certificate is a central part of our upcoming trainings at Fluence. And the real idea about this, probably the most important idea, is that this is something that you can take and will be sort of the beginning of your journey through our certificate programs. It teaches the basics around both psychedelic-assisted therapy and psychedelic harm reduction and integration. So previously, what we've really focused on, aside from our ketamine-assisted psychotherapy program, has been how to do harm reduction and integration. And what we're anticipating with more psychedelic compounds becoming available as treatments in the future is the need for more training as it relates to psychedelic-assisted psychotherapy. And so we spend a lot of time taking the feedback that we've received from students around what they would like a program to look like. And we've arrived here for this core piece. It's important to remember that once this is complete, you could then move on to more advanced trainings or the certificates for CAP, for psychedelic harm reduction integration, in the future for MDMA and other molecules. So this is a 6-week experience with 2 hours of live training per week, along with asynchronous learning content. So that means learning that you can do at your own pace. But it's really important to emphasize that that online learning that's asynchronous is actually integrated into our live learning. So we'll be discussing some of the videos and content that you have watched in between our live sessions. And so we've priced this at a competitive price of $2,500. And there are definitely opportunities for discounts here. So if you've taken our premise and promise training in the past, that cost will be taken off of this price. So that's $395. And if you've taken any of our certificate programs in the past, you will actually have access to this certificate for free. Because we really value you as our customers, as our community, and we want you to be able to access those advanced modules as they come online. You might ask, well, how is this different? And we might talk a little bit more about that later on in greater detail. But sort of the quick takeaway is that we've learned from all of you that you really would like to learn more than just theory, but actually focus more on practical technique and skills. And so this program is designed in a way to really emphasize what a clinician can do when they're doing either psychedelic assisted therapy or psychedelic harm reduction and integration. So this is just a quick overview of each week's topic. The first week is orientation, and that is more than just getting to know each other, although that's a really important part of it, the community building. We also discuss the differences between what is a psychedelic-assisted therapist, what is a psychedelic harm reduction integrationist, and really orienting people to what it means to do this work. In week 2, we really dive into some of the core concepts that underline these approaches. And then you might be familiar with week 3, 4, and 5 as reflecting the process that a patient or participant will go through in a psychedelic-assisted therapy treatment or study. So preparation, dosing, and integration. The key thing to say here is that we've gone through our existing content, and we've really looked at what are some of the more advanced concepts that we have thought about over the years. And that's really what we're going to be emphasizing here in these courses. This isn't really the fundamentals. This is a little bit more of the advanced thinking about these things. And then finally, we have a closing the circle week where we kind of bring together these ideas, have a little bit more of a Q&A, and essentially close the training. One thing that I'll add, and actually this segues nicely to my next slide, around the kind of on-demand training, the self-paced training that comes with this program, you'll notice that Premise and Promise is included. So if you have taken Premise and Promise in the past, right, you'll get that discount. If you haven't, it comes with the training and is meant to be kind of supplemental. Not necessarily required, but we encourage you to take it if you haven't. And so that's the idea, is this is where some of the more introductory concepts are introduced. This is what allows us to do more advanced discussion and learning during the 6-week live component. Many of these on-demand courses are also new. So our introduction to trauma-informed psychedelic-assisted therapy is included, ethics and equity. Intoxication and dissociation is a really amazing video that some of you have already seen that was created by Dr. Jeffrey Gus. Actually, in fact, we re-recorded it, but with much higher production value. So previously it was a live webinar. Now it's a fully produced video on, it was done in a studio. And this, our learning experience for these 6 weeks actually starts off with this intoxication and dissociation video, because it really it makes us kind of reflect on, and I think this title is intentionally provocative, but it helps us kind of reflect on what is it that we're doing? What do we mean by the psychedelic experience? What are some of the assumptions that we bring into this conversation? And so that's a really kind of evocative place to start for our first week, that orientation day. And of course, applied mindfulness for psychedelic therapists, which has been at the ground, the cornerstone of our approach from the very beginning at Fluence, which is this capacity to be reflective, open, to engage in inquiry, and to help promote that within our clients is a key component of this work. Again, whether you're doing psychedelic-assisted therapy or harm reduction and integration. And so for just the last slide here, if you're interested in applying, fluencetraining.com/apply is our URL. You can also visit our website. And we are planning on having 2 cohorts to start, one in the fall with an application due date of October 31st, 2023, and then a winter cohort with an application due date of November 30th, 2023. And you can see the program start dates here. We've determined also the start time. People are often wondering about that we will be looking at 12 p.m. Eastern time to 2 p.m. Eastern time every Tuesday between the 7th of November to the, starting with November 7th. And so we're hoping that time will be helpful for people both on the West Coast, the East Coast, and potentially even Europe in the evenings. So I'll stop here and maybe ping it back to Alex, just to maybe share a little bit, because you've been our director of the PHRI program. You engage with our students quite a bit, and you receive a lot of feedback. So I'm just curious if you could share with our audience, what is the logic behind some of our changes? What are the things that you've heard over the years?
Yeah, so thank you for turning that over. As you mentioned, I've had the opportunity to get feedback from a lot of our certificate students, and there are a few kind of common themes that I've heard over the years. The first was an acknowledgement of the depth of our training and an appreciation for the depth of our training, but also a acknowledgement that it was very expensive and took a long time to receive a certificate in this training. The current PHRI, Psychedelic Harm Reduction and Integration Certificate program, has taken most students about a year to complete. And one of the things we wanted to do in a redesign is to acknowledge that we're training working professionals, and that at our current price point and length of time of the training, it was inaccessible for many. So that was one of the drivers of our redesign. Another driver of the redesign was really a thought about how individuals wanted to use their training. So just to be clear, an individual in our who graduated from our psychedelic harm reduction and integration certificate program in the past would be able to offer that in their private practice. But many individuals were looking to understand and to get at least some basic training in psychedelic assisted therapy. So meaning training in the capacity to sit with a client, not so that they could use it in their private practice currently, because that is outside of our current scope of practice and legal framework, but in anticipation of extra specialization in the future with specific molecules, in anticipation of being able to potentially practice psychedelic assisted therapy in a non research setting in the future. And some individuals were interested in just getting that extra training to have another place to start and to learn what goes on in a facilitation session. And so we really did want to focus our new program on being able to offer that insight and that training into facilitation, into prep, into integration as well, but also give people something they could use currently in their private practice, which is psychedelic harm reduction and integration. So a student could come into this program and do the 6-week course, and then say, they're good with the training for now and they want to just practice integration in their private practice. This also gives individuals an opportunity to further decide later on that they want to further deepen their training in, for example, ketamine, or in, for example, MDMA, and potentially other molecules in the future, as Ingmar mentioned. The last bit of feedback I got was that many students were concerned of overlap between our certificate programs in terms of what they would learn, in terms of costs itself. And so this was a way to create a common foundation for every student who comes into the program. And from there, with everyone having that common training, an individual can specialize in what they want to get further training in. And I really think this program was designed in mind to be a little more nimble, a little more flexible, certainly more accessible for students. And as you mentioned, Ingmar, and I do want to reiterate, there is a focus on not just theory, but practical skills, and what a preparation session might actually look like, what an integration session might look like, and what facilitation looks like.
Thank you, Alex, for that one point around reducing some of the redundancy and repetition, because when we were looking at our certificate programs, and we do have students who want to take our CAP certificate, our PHRI, in the future, an MDMA certificate, and I looked at it from the perspective of one of our students, and I realized, well, there are certain core concepts that repeat themselves each one of these certificates, which is both adding time and money. So therefore, expense. So why reduce some of that repetition, have people really be able to engage in some of these core fundamentals, and then allow them to choose how they would like to specialize. And even if there is repetition, it still will come, or rather, if they choose multiple advanced sort of molecule specific learnings, it still comes under the price point of a single certificate program. So that was our intention here.
I'm seeing a couple questions come in. I do think it's maybe important to address them as they're coming up, so that we can get a little more conversation with our listeners. So I saw one question that I want to address related to access and inclusion. So one of the questions was, is access and inclusion built into this specific certificate program? So it is not. It is not a requirement to complete for this specific certificate program. I do want to note that Fluence does have other offerings outside of these certificates. Access and inclusion and psychedelic treatment is one of them. But that would be in addition to the core curriculum that we previewed.
And if I could just piggyback off of that piece, because so what is, you might be wondering, what is access and inclusion? And so that was a series of webinars that we did, which we created so that, and it covers, I believe, about 8 or 9, can't remember exactly right now, different topics that relates to access and inclusion in psychedelic therapy and medicine. It's a really, really wonderful series of videos, but it's quite long and quite dense. And some of the feedback that we received from students is that although they really value what is being taught, it takes actually quite a lot to get through. And so although there isn't one-to-one overlap between access and inclusion and what's in our new certificate program, if you remember the slides that I just showed, there is an equity and diversity training, and then there's also a training around trauma-informed care. And so the difference there is that those really focus on some of the skill sets and information that's needed, that I think is sort of aligned with the access and inclusion webinar, but it's just a little bit more condensed and sort of to the point. We do have plans of kind of improving and re-releasing access and inclusion in the future, but right now this is how we've decision we made in terms of, again, decreasing the amount of time that it takes to get through our core offering.
Yeah, and I would really emphasize that a lot of the material in that webinar series is built into the core certificate. It's just not named access and inclusion in our materials.
So somebody asks here also, and by the way, if any of you have questions about Fluence just generally and our offerings, this is meant to be really an open house. And so we can talk about the new program, but also if you have other questions, we're very happy to speak to them. So one question is, does this go beyond the ketamine-assisted psychotherapy program, which I just joined? So one thing I just want to say at the get-go, if you have joined any of our certificate programs, you'll be able to access this new program for free. So that's one thing that we just want to say. Will it go beyond it? As I said, that we're looking at sort of more advanced topics. I mean, you will see a little bit of repetition, but we really are bringing in more kind of advanced, nuanced ideas that relate to the delivery of psychedelic-assisted therapy and harm reduction. So we're hoping that there's not too much overlap. It's by design. One thing that I haven't mentioned is that one thing that I'm really focusing on is bringing in more handouts. So one thing that I've created that would be part of this would be a handout around a script so that you as a clinician can use when speaking to a client about a psychedelic, how to prepare a client for a psychedelic experience. And so there will be a lot more of that, essentially kind of like a little toolkit that you'll be able to access and then use. Let's see here. Lots of questions coming in. So let's see, because I think there's a little bit of overlap. So the question here is, with your certifications, will this be accepted by local boards, rule makers for when these medicine molecules are legal? Will it be accepted so we can practice administration facilitation sessions? Yes, this is sort of a core question. So one of our philosophies is that if we offer something, we want there to be a pathway for you to be able to actually practice it. And so with ketamine-assisted psychotherapy, with psychedelic harm reduction and integration, those are things that you can practice, provided that you work with the prescriber and you have a sort of a partnership in which you can prescribe and or work with somebody who's taking ketamine. So as it pertains to new molecules, we do have a partnership with MAPS. This isn't widely announced yet, but we will be sharing it with our community, with you all, very soon. And we will be providing, as part of one of our advanced trainings or certificates that kind of builds off of this one that we're announcing today, there will be a MDMA education program that is in partnership with MAPS and includes MAPS's content. So that includes recorded sessions of participants from their clinical trials where we are actually learning from real life cases. There's a caveat there that relates to your question, which is that as it pertains to any molecule that is currently being investigated under the FDA, or even with MAPS where we're at the cusp of those data being submitted to the FDA for review, we can't predict what's going to happen in terms of federal legalization. So this is my long-winded way of saying, what we're going to be offering to you as it relates to MDMA is the closest thing that is possibly available to get you a head start in potentially becoming an MDMA-assisted psychotherapist. I say potentially because we don't want to upset the FDA by making any kind of prediction or assertion as to whether that will happen or not. So I know that's a little bit nuanced, but that nuance is really, really important. One maybe thing I'll just add here is that we do have our Oregon psychedelic facilitator training for, psilocybin facilitator training, where at a state level it is legal. And as new states begin to legalize various kinds of psychedelic assisted therapies, you can count on us to be offering those trainings.
Yeah, so that Ingmar kind of leads into what I'm seeing as a couple of questions in the Q&A. One question I think we can answer pretty definitively was whether this program is a prerequisite for the psilocybin assisted therapy certification. I just want to clarify that program that we offer right now is for Oregon practitioners. No, it is not. This is not a prerequisite for that program, but that program is specifically designed to meet the training criteria for Oregon. I don't know if you have anything more to add.
Yeah, I would just like to say that, I would love for us to be able to change the Oregon program in the sense of it being shorter and more affordable and kind of build off of what we're doing here with today's announcement. But as Alex has said, due to the requirements of the OHA, for example, it has to be 160 hours, right? There are just certain things that we cannot change, and therefore the psilocybin training program is not part of everything that we're talking about today in terms of changes to our certificates.
Yeah. I do want to add we are accepting applications for a fall cohort for that Oregon psilocybin program. But that would be a different application process. And it's a different program from what we're talking about today.
I do want to remind everybody, if you could please add your questions to the FAQ, or rather the Q&A. So if you scroll to the bottom of your window, you'll probably see a Q&A button. I see some people are submitting to the chat, which we'll do our best to capture, but as the chat scrolls down and sometimes we miss the question. So if you could use the Q&A button, that would be really great. One of the questions I did see in the chat is if I mentioned that the live meetings are from 12 to 2 p.m. Eastern time on Tuesdays. And yes, that's correct for our first fall cohort.
No, Ingmar, I saw this in the chat, and it might actually be helpful for us to elaborate the difference between psychedelic assisted therapy and psychedelic harm reduction and integration. Because these terms might be new to some people here. So I thought that would be important for us to elaborate. I can certainly answer that, but would you like to give kind of a concise, if you can, differentiate?
Yeah, sure. So the way we think about psychedelic assisted psychotherapy is where you as the clinician are present when the person receives the dose of whatever psychedelic you're working with. So you are sort of in that psychedelic assisted process sort of acutely, whereas psychedelic harm reduction and integration is any kind of relationship or supporting of a client or patient, but you are not necessarily there when they are taking the psychedelic. So this might be somebody who is using psychedelics on their own. That might be somebody who's considering using psychedelics but have never used one. It might be somebody who goes to South America for a psilocybin or say ayahuasca experience. And so you're their kind of touchstone in terms of preparation and integration.
I'm just looking through the Q&A.
Sorry, I can take one. So here, do you expect this training and certification to help with being able to work with MDMA once there is FDA approval? So this training, and particularly the upcoming MDMA education program, I would say, yes, it will definitely. Well, again, I have to be careful about what I say, but I would say yes, it will help. I can't really say more than that, but that is what I would say. How many people will be in each cohort? That's a really great question. The way that we're designing this is that we will have breakout groups. So, well, first of all, the maximum will be 100 students. And we want to have smaller groups for kind of group learning that will be 12 students. And then with also smaller practice experiences that then goes down to 4 students. So we'll see how the reception that we receive around this training, but that is how it's currently designed. So in other words, just to maybe say a little bit more there, when there's a lecture component of the live experience, everyone's together because listening doesn't necessarily require a small group. But then when people are actually engaging with the content together, discussion, practice, role plays, that kind of thing, we then bring that to a smaller group.
Yeah, I'm just looking through. So I'm trying to kind of group some of the questions around common themes. So a common theme that's coming out from this, and it's a great question, is sort of what can I do with this training, and who will it be recognized, and will this be recognized by states if they sort of change their regulatory framework? So I want to be clear as to what this training currently is and what we don't know. So we don't know what each state, let's say there's kind of each state follows the Oregon model and creates their own kind of legal framework around offering some sort of psychedelic, supervised psychedelic service. We can't predict what their training requirements will be. And so, one could do this program and conceivably that another state would require you to do extra training or different kind of training. We just we don't know on a state level what each state's training requirements will be. What this training can do, that I'm quite certain of, is it can give you a foundation to offer psychedelic harm reduction and integration in your private practices today, so that would remain in your scope of practice. It will also give you the foundational knowledge to continue your training in molecules that Fluence begins to offer training in. And Fluence is really emphasizing, training that you can work with legally, so that, for example, that's why we have a ketamine program. One is able to do that in their private practice. And so we offer training in that. Ingmar has mentioned kind of the next molecule up for us to begin to offer training in is MDMA, and that's because it is kind of moving along. Again, we cannot predict, so we're not certain that the FDA will approve it as a treatment on an outpatient basis, but that's sort of the next molecule that's on a federal level and through the FDA process on the way to some form of treatment and legalization. I don't know if you would want to add to that, Ingmar, or clarify.
No, I think that's well put.
And so I see a question, for example, if I complete this program, will I be able to work in a ketamine center? You will certainly, the answer is sort of like, it depends on whether that ketamine center wants to hire you or not. I would say this would be a great introduction. This would give you a foundation for that training. Again, Fluence does offer and will be offering even more advanced training in ketamine specifically if you really want to have a deep knowledge in, for example, ketamine. Moving ahead, looking forward, this is where you start. And, one could start and do this program and then decide they want to learn more about ketamine and get specific ketamine training. But I would say this is pretty sufficient foundation.
Yeah, just to build off of that and touch on something that you said earlier, Alex, is that in practice, I think a ketamine center could hire any licensed professional who has psychotherapy within their scope of practice to do preparation and integration work. That being said, as part of our professional development and also sort of protection around potential malpractice, is that we can demonstrate that we have taken some sort of extra steps towards an area of expertise or focus. And so if you take one of our programs, you can then say, yes, I've been hired by this ketamine center, I'm working there, and this is not just something that I came up with. I've actually taken this certificate. I haven't mentioned continuing education comes with it, so it is recognized by an official body. It has certain standards, learning objectives, so it can make you more attractive as a potential person to work at a ketamine clinic, as well as it a little bit of kind of sort of covering yourself or protecting yourself around any kind of issues. Not to, of course, forget that you hopefully have developed some skills and knowledge to be able to practice in a way that is effective and safe, or increases safety with the people you're working with. One thing that I'll mention here is another question that I said that I would answer live which is the question is whether a person is required to be a therapist to participate in our program, or can other licensed medical professionals apply? And what is most important for us is that you have a scope of practice and a license. And so we please submit your application. We're happy to evaluate this on a case-to-case basis, but there definitely have been licensed professionals who have been part of our program. One part that's important, though, is that we want you to have some sort of familiarity or exposure to psychotherapy, because we will be doing exercises, and it can be sometimes frustrating for students if they are engaging with somebody in a psychotherapy practice and their peer doesn't really know the basics. So we want to kind of have a certain level, basic level of capability, so that we have a positive learning experience for everybody involved.
And I would add that the program is also open to individuals who are on their way to receiving their independent license as well. We do want people with some training behind them. So this program would probably not be appropriate, for example, for a first-year graduate student. But someone who's had some experience and who is on their way to an independent license, in the psychotherapy world, that's often postdoc or pre-licensure status, that's appropriate. Someone who's in their first year of graduate school, it might be less so.
Somebody asks here, I think the question is whether, and I've answered this question, but I really think it's worth repeating the question of whether this is sort of redundant or repetitive with the psychedelic integration harm reduction certificate or premise and promise. And I want to say that one, if you've taken the certificate program, this is free, but two, we designed this program with this exact question in mind. We were thinking, okay, like we really don't want people to go through this program thinking, oh, well, this is just the same stuff that I've already done. And so we're really, well, as I mentioned before, what we're really trying to do is say, okay, well, what are kind of the more advanced ideas or topics, well, not just topics and ideas, but actual kind of technique and practice that people will want to learn.
And that kind of speaks to another question. It overlaps about whether this will be a prerequisite to the new MDMA and a new CAP program in the future. Yes, it is intended for this to be the starting point for all individuals who want to get that advanced training in, for example, MDMA. This would be where they start. I want to be clear here that even with this as the prerequisite and having that advanced, training module, the overall price point, we have intended it for the overall price point to be lower than our previous certificate programs. So even if you took our core program and then took an advanced module, for example, in CAP or in the future in MDMA, we intend that to be lower than kind of our previous price points have been.
And I like the second part of that question, which is, or perhaps this program will allow for a shorter and less expensive specialization. So the answer is like yes to both. So that is very much the intention here, that those advanced certificates are going to be shorter in duration than the total our current certificates, meaning PHRI and CAP, and also more affordable. So there was a question here in the chat. Do we offer a relationship with physicians who complete your course and obtain any of our certifications? And have we considered franchising? It's funny, when we just started, somebody asked us if we wanted to franchise. That was like 2 years ago. We haven't moved in that direction. I guess it's something that we could revisit and explore, but we haven't really pursued that yet. In terms of the question around connecting to physicians, I think what we're trying to do is create a community here and actually If you're not already on our listserv, that is where there are many physicians who've taken our classes, and we know that collaborations happen. So that's one point of connection. The other thing that I would say is that if you're not familiar with Journey Clinical, which is one of our partner businesses or companies, the purpose of their company is to solve this problem in terms of allowing mental health professionals to connect with a prescriber in order to do, at this point in time, ketamine-assisted psychotherapy with the clients. And again, with all the caveats around the uncertainty of MDMA and whether it will be, we can't predict whether it will become a prescribable medicine. But if it does become a prescribable medicine, I know that Journey Clinical will be doing everything that it can in order to have MDMA as part of its platform to make that available to therapists and their clients. By the way, I'm on their, for full transparency, on their, I lead their scientific advisory board. So that's how I know it's part of the discussion.
There's a question about scholarships available for this certificate program. A limited number of slots are scholarship slots are available for this specific scholarship program. So short answer is yes.
Somebody says here, what if you're unable to attend one of the sessions? So do the sessions need to be attended live? The sessions do need to be attended live, but we've designed this in a way where if somebody misses one of the live sessions, you can still get credit. One thing to say, well, why are we so strict about this? Well, particularly for social work, continuing education credits, there cannot be any hours missed in the live training. It's very, very, very strict. And so this is why we did everything we could to allow for this one accommodation, because things happen, but it will be limited to only to one of the 6 missed weeks. Something I wanted to just also add here, with our redesign of our certificate programs, you might be wondering, well, what happens with some of the other reading groups that we have, or the clinical consultation groups, some of our other offerings? Those will continue to exist. So for example, we have really in-depth trainings related to psychoanalysis and psychedelics, or psychopharmacology and psychedelics. Those will continue to exist, and you can take them if you want to specialize, but you can think of them as additional programming that is not a requirement for our kind of restructuring of certificates. And I welcome you to visit our website, look at our courses page, and see what some of those kind of independent or individual offerings look like. I see here in the FAQ a question around what will the cost for the advanced modules like CAP and MDMA look like. We are aiming to have them come in at about $3,000 for about 60 hours of training, meaning both synchronous and asynchronous combined, self-paced and live. So that is, we've come up with that number based off of what we anticipate the standards to be in a post-approval world. So that's not something that we've just arbitrarily came up with. It's something that we, to our knowledge at this time, expect to be the standard. Again, things can change. We can't predict the future, but this is we have strong confidence in this. So, one way to think about it is that currently our PHRI certificate or CAP certificate comes in at somewhere around 160 hours, 120 hours. So if you were to do this core foundational training that we're offering, that we're talking about today, that we're starting and collecting applications for, and then you look at, say, PHRI, we would expect that to come around somewhere around 90 hours, maybe a little bit less. So we're bringing that total time down. Somebody asks, I believe we collaborate with Journey Clinical. Yes, we do. Are your courses also accessible through them as part of their training requirements? So yes, we have, well, yes and no. We have to be careful about how we answer that. So we have an on-demand version of our ketamine assisted psychotherapy, and also our premise and promise videos are on their platform. It's part of their training process for their members. But we consider this to be more education than training. And that might seem like we're splitting hairs here, but because there's no real opportunity for practice or opportunity for live learning, it's all self-paced and on-demand. We consider it to be more on the education side than training. It's not at all to speak negatively about Journey or about the programming that we have that has made for them. It's just to say that these are sort of our standards of education versus training. And you know, I think we can, this is a good question. I don't think we've come across this, but I think we'd have to discuss this internally, but we should, maybe there's an opportunity there to also introduce a discount if this is something that you've done before at Journey Clinical. I think that's likely that we could offer a discount there.
So I'm just looking at some of the remaining questions. I just want to be clear to people sort of where they should start, you know, and you know, I always kind of recommend for those who are very, very new and they just want, you know, they've come across this field, they're very interested, they're very passionate, but they don't know a lot. I do recommend people tend to start with premise and promise, and not necessarily jump right into a certificate program. That's why we have allowed for individuals who then take premise and promise to deduct $395 off their tuition if they decide they want to learn more and jump into this certificate program. You know, I feel as though it can be a start for some people, but I understand even, you know, $2,500 can feel like a lot as a starting point. So for those who are coming in fresh and want to, you know more about Fluence and Fluence's teaching style, you know, I would say feel free to jump into any of our courses, including and especially premise and promise. And then your tuition, should you then decide you want to apply to this program, your tuition will be deducted $395 because you've already taken premise and promise.
And just to build off of that, because I see a question here in the FAQ, which I'm again proud to be able to answer. They're asking if they are a mental health provider and licensed, but they don't necessarily deal with direct patient care. They might be doing more administrative work related to clinical practice. What's a good place to start? And I'm proud to be able to say that we have self-paced, on-demand content specific to ketamine, understanding ketamine, introduction to ketamine, where I think that will provide you with plenty of information for your role that you can do at your own time at a lower price point than $2,500 or $3,000. And I think it'll get you to where you want to be. We also have a live workshop version of those two courses as well. So we have an Understanding Ketamine workshop that is sort of at that same level in December. So check out our website and sign up for that workshop. You'll be able to get a little bit more, you know, it's live, so you can interact with us and ask questions. But I really want to share that with you and anyone who's listening. You know, you don't have to necessarily be doing living the therapy to interface with some of our offerings and benefit from it. And then if you decide to go further with us, we can, as Alex had mentioned, like if you like it so much that you want to do something more advanced, you know, we can then credit you a discount. Aha, okay. Somebody appreciate the ping here. Somebody had said, please answer my last question. What are the requirements to be a ketamine assisted therapist? I'm in New York City. So just to sort of say once more, there are no regulatory requirements aside from having a license to practice psychotherapy But I had mentioned earlier that what can be really helpful is having some evidence that you have learned this area of expertise or specialization. So a certificate of certification, certificate of completion, continuing education, those are all really helpful, that if you want to again show to your employer, or if there's any kind of evaluation of you as a therapist, you can say, no, this is not something that I just made up. This is a recognized way of working. It's legitimate, and here's the evidence for the learning that I've undergone. So if you were to do the training with us, then we think that would make you a very competitive, employable candidate at a center that offers ketamine-assisted psychotherapy. And again, from a regulatory perspective, again, as long as you have a license to practice psychotherapy, you would be good to go. So I think the Q&A has slowed down. There is great. So I just want to check, Alex, or anyone else, if there's anything in the chat that we might have missed. I think we might begin to wind down. You know, maybe to say one more thing as it relates to the psychedelic-assisted therapies, psilocybin-assisted therapy. You know, at this moment, the landscape is such that federally, psilocybin-assisted therapy is not legal. On a state level, psilocybin-facilitated experiences are legal in Oregon, and Colorado. It has been voted upon that psilocybin, and I believe some other psychedelics, will be legal as in a form of therapy in Colorado at that level. However, the regulations around that are being worked on, and so although that is passed, at this very moment, it's training or being able to deliver that work it's not possible. But we anticipate that to be ready very, very soon. And again, like Fluence will be here to offer that. Now, there are different bills and proposals that are being moved through many, many different states at this time, the various degrees of success. And again, as those come online, as they become legal, you can count on us to be able to deliver those trainings. And so the second cohort of the Psychedelic Therapy and Integration certificate will launch or rather the 16th of January, and the application due date will be the November 30th. So that's for the second cohort. And somebody asked this earlier. We're going to try to mix up the time of day and the day of the week, because I'm sure that conflicts for some people who have work. So if you're not able to make the first cohort due to a conflict, we're really going to try to make that available to you. So yeah, I think we're coming up to the hour. Alex, is there anything that you would like to maybe add before we close?
Yeah, no, there was a question about, overlap with the current PHRI program and what the difference is, et cetera. And, as I think we mentioned a couple times, but I really want to make very clear, moving forward, this is where people should start if they are interested only in psychedelic harm reduction and integration. This is where you would start, and you would learn more than you would in premise and promise, and you would get more kind of as Ingmar, you said, sort of advanced theory and practice. And from there, should you continue to want to specialize in psychedelic harm reduction and integration, we will have an advanced module specifically dedicated to that. That would be, again, outside of this program. And we also offer additional courses outside of the certificate program, as you mentioned, sort of psychedelics and psychoanalysis, and some areas where if you have specialized interest and want to dig even deeper, you can. This core program is really designed to be a way to give everyone that foundational learning, and then you get to choose for yourself what you want to do with it, how you want to build on it, if you want to build on it. And we wanted to offer kind of an accessible entry point.
So thank you, Alex. Thank you, all of you in attendance. Really fantastic questions, very engaged audience. I'll close that if you're interested in this program, please visit us at fluencetraining.com/apply or visit our website. You'll be able to navigate there. Feel free to email us or me directly, Ingmar@fluencetraining.com, or our info address, info@fluencetraining.com, and we'll be happy to answer any of your questions. So again,
And
thank you so much.
I'll give my email as well, alex@fluencetraining.com.
Thank you so much.